I've traveled countless miles of road through countless cities and towns, from the majesty of mountains to the wealth of prairie farms, from the cities of Ontario to the beauty of Quebec. From a fishing boat off Labrador, I've watched the red sun set. Canada, wondrous lady that you are, we will praise your beauty and your future. This is your hour, it's a place to look ahead and dream, a place to watch the stars. It's a home that's filled with happiness. This land.
There are more than 6,000 hutterites in Alberta, leading a life quite different from most Canadians. It is based on an idea, on faith, and it is very old. Hutterites, the Hutterian Brethren, share with many philosophers, both ancient and modern, a sense of the collective responsibility of human beings to live well together, for their own welfare and the better to worship God. Theirs is a noble tradition and a hard one. They live in communes or colonies which reflect their notion of the ideal society. It's not an ideal much shared by modern people who have other ideas about the good life and who have often treated them with suspicion. This program is dedicated to the removal of distrust. Dr. John Forster, a sociologist at the University of Alberta.
Communes have existed for a very long time. In many parts of the world, there are groups of persons who live together, generally in an agricultural setting, in order to maintain a style of life to which they have some commitment.
That commitment we can recognize not only in the idealistic communities of North America, but elsewhere too. In the Russian kolkhoz, the elite Israeli kibbutzim, or in a much bigger scale in China. Dr. Brian Evans, specialist in Chinese affairs.
A commune is the basic unit of Chinese administration. It comprises from 30 to 50,000 people, and it looks after every aspect of a Chinese individual's life. It looks after the tax collection, health, welfare programs. It's a very efficient means of organizing a country of this size, and I think that they've been extremely successful. They combine traditional Chinese values with some innovations put in by particularly Mao Zedong. Ideology plays a fairly important role, but when you think that in Chinese tradition, the idea of the individual has not been as prominent as it is in the West, then Chinese find it easier to work together in a sort of communal relationship. And I think it's the communes which have enabled the Chinese to weather some extremely difficult economic distress.
In a Western context, the special dedication of a commune's members is more important.
The characteristics of the truly successful commune seem to hinge upon a thorough dedication to a point of view. That is, to the faith of the members that what they are doing is right, sensible, and proper. This commitment to a point of view has frequently led them into conflict with the larger societies in which they live. The larger society arguing that the individual rights of commune members are frequently denied. On the other hand, communes have argued, it seems to me, with considerable justice, that the rights of the community at large, in fact, are more important than the rights of the individual members.
In the larger society of Alberta, there are some 82 hutterite communes. Communal society, says an official hutterite statement, was established by our Lord Jesus Christ with his 12 disciples. It can be compared likewise, the statement goes on, to a colony of bees, a herd of sheep with their shepherd, or even to a flock of pigeons. The Hutterian brethren see their communal way of life as deeply natural. There are colonies like this scattered throughout the prairie provinces and in parts of the United States. Theirs is a long history, studded with real and fancied persecution. Their colonies are held together by faith, faith in their own history of suffering. Their statement tells how their ancestors were tortured with the most painful method, as strangled, skinned alive, and hanged to scaffolds, stoned to death with stones, sawed apart by saws. Most of them were confined in a press and stretched so that you could see the sun shine through them. And faith, too, in their straightforward reading of the New Testament. Here at Crossfield, Alberta, the colony boss, Mike Cheddar, affirms that belief.
The religion is based on the New Testament. And this is what we go by, is the New Testament. It's not, some people think it's a hutterite religion. It's really not. It's based on the New Testament. And if you read Exodus 2, where it says that all that live in communes like have everything in common. They sold their possessions and put it to the apostles' feet. And this is what we go by. This is what our whole system is based on, is the New Testament.
The Hutterite looks out at the ordinary world with some suspicion. Though the Crossfield colony was warmly hospitable, filming was made difficult by their attitude to photographs.
Well, the reason that we object to photographing is in the Ten Commandments. It says, thou shalt not worship idols. And I believe that when a person gets his photo taken and just thinks too much of it, that's an idol. And we do not worship idols in no way.
Our crew was able to film the colony, provided it did not dwell on people's faces. We were grateful for the chance. The resultant footage is a privileged insight into a fascinating mode of life. What we saw when we came to look was stillness and silence. 75 people live here, 10 families working 5,200 acres, plus a further section of leased land. Yet hours can go by and you won't see a soul. But appearances can be deceptive. Inside those buildings, there are people at work. Hutterites have been working like this since the 16th century. From Moravia to the Ukraine to Dakota, they have been hounded from continent to continent. Today, there are 82 colonies in Alberta. Crossfield is just one of them. It's probably one of the more prosperous. Their history has given the Hutterites a certain fear of the outside world, a fear of being contaminated by it. The colonies look inward to themselves, not out at the rest of the country. They are required to have their children taught the public school curriculum, but they won't let them go past grade 9, however bright they are, and they top what the teacher does with the Bible school and kindergarten in their own native German. Yet, in matters of agriculture, these people are very well briefed. They get their know-how through experience.
Well, this knowledge comes from along the line. Like we've been farmers for a long, long time, and one learned from the other. And as we progress, we look around, we see things the way people do it. And if we see they make mistakes, then we try to better them.
These chicken pluckers, for example, were made right on the colony out of an old washing machine. lined with rubber prongs.
And a lot of people have come to us and seen what we're doing, and they're trying to do the same thing. If something fails, well, then we try and find out what's wrong, and we try and do it better.
The colony is organized by an elected manager called the colony boss. Beneath him are the various specialist bosses, the chicken boss, the cattle boss. These are also chosen by common consent of the men. The Hutterites have always been farmers, close to the land. In an age of declining traditional agriculture, they flourish because they are big, diverse, and efficient. In the hog barn, there is automatic feeding, and the extractor fan is controlled by humidistats. A grade 9 education, 400 years of experience, and sheer purpose put them there. In Canada, there has been discrimination against the Hutterites. The now suspended Alberta Communal Properties Act limited their freedom to buy land. Farmers have complained about unfair competition, and local tradesmen dislike the leverage their bulk buying gives them. But only a few complain. A few miles away lives Mrs. Becker. She moved here a couple of years ago with her husband and has learned a lot from the Hutterites.
I've known the Hutterites very intimately for about 2 years. Before I knew them as well, I probably looked on them as rather a different people. But since I've got to know them as very close friends, they're not different at all, really. They're subject to the same sorrows and happinesses that we all are in our society. And they love and they laugh and they think very much the same as I do in our society. I have 2 teenagers who have learned an awful lot from the kids at the colony. And may I tell the story about the trip to Creston? She went cherry picking with the girls at Creston last year, and she was dressed like a Hutterite girl. She was actually behaving and under the guidance of the Hutterite elders at the time. And she really found what it was like to wear the other pair of shoes. She was asked to leave a particular store, and she was allowed to only go into the store in 2s, and she found that this was because she was dressed like a Hutterite, and she really said that society isn't what she thought it was. She got a very rude awakening to what society can do to people.
The daily routine is simple. They're up at 6:45. There's a communal breakfast, followed by work until a snack at 9. A break for lunch, and another for coffee and cake at 3. In the evening, there's a sermon, and often singing until it's time for bed. The work of the colony is communal. Women work together to bake the bread they will all eat. But like people outside, they marry and live with their families in separate duplex houses. Not that courtship is the same as it is elsewhere.
Well, young people, they go from one calling to another, sometimes go on trips, and then when they see someone they like, this is the way they get engaged. And after they want to get married, of course, you have to get baptized first. When they want to get married, they ask the elder, like the minister, and he calls a meeting, and all the members have to consent. And then you just proceed with the marriage. Well, after they get married, they just have to live it out for the rest of their lives. There's no divorces in the colony.
Children under 15 eat separately from the adults. If they're under 6, they go to the kindergarten. And for new babies, there are special arrangements.
Well, when a woman has a baby, she gets special food, and she doesn't have to work for about, I'd say around 14 weeks after she had the baby.
In the school, which doubles in the evenings as the church, the children are taught in English by Mrs. Litke, a government-appointed teacher from outside the colony.
I have been teaching here. This is going to be my 4th year. Not 4 years, consecutive years, but 4 different years. Basically, they're only interested in learning to read and write English so they can communicate with the outside world. And other than that, I don't think they feel a need for anything else that we have. And if they don't feel a need, I'm not going to say that they're being deprived. Their role in life is definitely, at an early age, defined. These little girls know that at 15 they're going to go to the kitchen and cook. They are homemakers, definitely homemakers. They're learning to embroider, etc., take care of the baby at home. Some of these little children I have here are doing that now, and the boys likewise are taught to take care of the chicken house or the pig barn down at the shop. This little guy in Greek too. He's only 7. And he's a real smarty. I'm not fooling. And he's the ringleader. In fact, I predicted he'll be the boss here someday. And he and 4 other little boys were caught in the shop. And he was welding. A toy. Now, mind you, there was real hard spanking, but nevertheless, he knows.
The boss of the colony is elected by vote. The New Testament is notoriously hard on women, so they are excluded on the authority of the good book. But the vote is crucially important in the affairs of the colony. The chicken boss, the cattle boss, the field boss, they're all elected. If a couple wants to marry, the preacher calls a meeting to discuss the proposal, and there's a collective decision. But the women don't vote.
They don't vote in our elections. This is true. But the women, they, as far as they're concerned, what things they do, we don't even interfere. We believe our women are all right. They're doing a good job for us. We really don't discriminate against them.
The women have asked for a clothes dryer, and will get one as soon as the money is available. The whole colony is deep in machinery.
We're getting pretty modern. Well, in this age, you pretty much have to. You can't work anymore with the horses like we used to. You have to get big tractors. These roads are all gravel and paved, so you have to have big trucks. You can't haul your grain anymore like you used to. And times have really changed. You've got to farm more economical to make a go of things. You got to make more money, and you spend a lot more, too, to keep operating. We run mixed farming here. We have cattle, we have hogs, we have chickens. And then we raise wheat, as well as oats and barley. And we feed most of our grains, although we do haul some wheat to town for the elevator. So I would say we could feed up everything that we grow here.
Faced with that sort of power and purpose, what can the local farmer do to compete? One local man, Ed Murray, leases his land to the colony.
I just was working too hard for what I was making, I thought, and for the type of investment that I had, I just wasn't getting a very good return on it. maybe I wasn't the world's best manager, so I think I rent to them because after they farmed it for a few years, it'll be better than it was before. They'll pick the rocks and kill the wild oats, and they're just excellent farmers.
Vi er bitten her ved hende hyrhåb. Sagen siger til dig, gå, vi er flere fra verden her i Sofas.
Meals begin with the colony boss saying grace. Then there's silence while the people eat. Women sit separate from the men, as in an old Quaker meeting house. The food is excellent, the hospitality generous, and the surroundings utilitarian.
The kitchen is run by the cook. She's the head cook there, and she tells the women that are under her what to do. She provides the meals, arranges them, and the two girls that help her, or women, they do what she says. I think it's a great system. We have lots of security here. When people get old, they're unable to work, we leave them right here in the colony, and we provide for them until they die. People who are raised in the colony, they would like to remain here until they die. I don't think there has been that many changes, like some colonies that aren't run to properly. People go to the extreme. They like to dress different and do things that are just against the colony. And eventually, they'll just fade away.
The cattle barn was designed and built by the colony. About as sophisticated as such things can be, it has automatic feeding, carefully planned access, and throughput routes for the cattle. Like everything else in the colony, it is spotlessly clean.
Some people are very ignorant, and they don't know how hutterites live. And I believe that if more people would know how we live, they'd have a different attitude towards us. And by letting you in here and taking films, taking pictures, I believe that'll smarten some of these people up. Colonies are not all the same. Like I mentioned before, a colony is just like a company. If it's run right, then it'll progress. And if the leaders aren't running it right, then it's bound to go bankruptcy. Or things don't work well for them.
On weekends, the colony's children gather together and clean up the farm. These children will be baptized when they are 20 or older, and then they'll do adults' work. Chances are that some of them will leave the colony to look for better things outside, but they'll all come back.
Well, the experience that I've had with them, and we had a few boys that had left here, I believe they're not satisfied in their mind. They're looking for greater things. In fact, two of my boys had left. One was gone for a month and a half, and the other was gone for 5 months. And when they came back, they said that things aren't as rosy as they thought it'd be. It's a lot of hard work out there, and every time they turn their back or go to town, they have to reach in their pocket for money. And it costs a lot of money to live out in the world. Here in the colony, they don't need money. When you go to town, you give them an allowance, but that's all they'll need, because their shoes and their clothes and everything is provided by the colony. And I've also experienced that when they come back, they're better boys than they were before, because they know what they found out what they've looking for, and it's not as good as they thought it is.
Like the pigeons that wheel everywhere about the farm, the brethren always return to the flock. The whole cycle of birth, living, and death is played out here.
Well, when somebody dies here in the colony, We get together in the evenings like, and we sing hymns till around 12 o'clock at midnight. And that goes on for 2 nights. And then after that, we proceed with the funeral. And every colony has its own cemetery.
We couldn't get permission to film a church service. There's no special building. They use the schoolhouse. There, the people listen to sermons in German and remind themselves of the Word of God and the faith that keeps them together. Communes are not ordinary things. They are, as some good Protestants used to call themselves, peculiar. And because they are special, they arouse antagonism. But is there anything in the hutterites' way of life that could harm us? We may find them austere, averse to loveliness, blind to knowledge, indifferent to scholarship. Yet we must admire their vigor, their integrity, their faith.
Next week on this land, the story of pioneers who settled in eastern Canada. The Scottish folk who came in the early 1800s to Lanark County in the beautiful Ottawa Valley. That's next Wednesday night. Hutterites was produced by Jackie Mack, CBC Edmonton. Cameraman Andy Oppen. Sound Casey Kozak. Lighting Bill Kuzu. Film editor Fran Onander.